Hello, Psych2Go viewers. Our guest for today's live stream is Dr. Kirk Honda. You may know him from his amazing YouTube channel, Psychology in Seattle, which has amassed millions of views and over 300,000 subscribers. I'm Michelle Rivas, host of Psychology Roundtable, and we're super excited to have Dr. Kirk Honda here today. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And so, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background for those who don't know?
Well, I've been a therapist and a professor for 27 years-ish in Seattle, and I've been a YouTuber and podcaster for 15 years. We just celebrated our 15th anniversary with a 15-hour YouTube live stream this past weekend.
That's amazing. And when did the YouTube channel started after the podcast, right?
Slightly, yeah. I had a student at the time who said, "You have to put your stuff on YouTube." And I was like, "YouTube? Why?" 'Cause I didn't know any better, but here we are.
Yeah, and so it's different though having, I'm sure, a podcast and YouTube. It's like two different platforms. So, but that's
Yeah.
amazing. And so just to start off, I wanted to ask, so this is such an important conversation because roughly about 40 million Americans click on porn related sites regularly. And so I just really wanted to cover this topic. It's kind of all over YouTube. So to start off, I wanted to ask, when does the use of pornography cross the line from healthy to dangerous, such as developing an addiction?
Mhm. Yeah. People often will define any sort of addiction, including porn addiction, as a frequency issue. Like if you do it X amount per week or per day or for this amount of hours, then you have an addiction. And that's not how we clinicians define addiction. We don't even use the word addiction typically. We'll use compulsion or problem use. And with porn compulsion or porn addiction, colloquially, what we call it, the individual, regardless of how often they consume pornography, and really we're talking about pornography and masturbation usually. It's not, although pornography addiction can include a fair amount of pornography viewing that has nothing to do with self-stimulation or with masturbation. So, but it often does involve that anyway. So I just want to throw that in there. But the definition of a compulsion or a problem use or a problem with porn is that you're obsessed with the pornography, meaning that you're preoccupied, you're thinking about it, you have intrusive thoughts, you have cravings. That's an uncontrollable urge to think about it, even though you don't want to. You also have an associated compulsion to view pornography. You spend more time than you want to. You often spend a lot of time. It interferes with other parts of your life. You're neglecting parts of your life, or you could even get fired from a job because you were looking at it at work.
Yeah.
I've had people mandated to see me for that. And then there's negative consequences because of the obsession, because of the compulsion to your job, relationships, to your self-esteem, to your health, happiness, hobbies, money, that kind of thing. And in more, severe addictions of any sort, the individual will have a lot of excuses because they're out of control for themselves, and they're having a hard time. There's cognitive dissonance where they have this need and they keep acting out that need. There's another part of this, like, I don't want to do this. And sometimes what that will mean, push comes to shove, is they will actually suppress or have all these internal denial mechanisms that actually will repress that voice that is saying no. So they might even tell themselves this is natural, or everyone is doing this, or it's normal to neglect your kids while you're looking at porn, that kind of thing. And then there's a lot of shame often involved for a lot of people with addiction. There's a shame cycle, if you will, of self-esteem, degradation, relationship falling apart. I'm not worthy. So those are the ways that we can define it. In terms of how often, typically for the people that I've treated and clinically, people who have an addiction to porn, we're talking about typically, but not always, this individual is looking at pornography several hours a day, and they are potentially masturbating several times a day. And it is it's a constant monkey on their back. It's always it's sort of like with cigarette addiction.
Mhm.
You go for half an hour without smoking a cigarette, and then the cravings start beginning. You're at a movie theater and you can't smoke, and this voice is just like, you can skip this part, go outside and have a cigarette. And you're just like, no, I want to watch this movie.
Yeah.
It'd be the same with pornography. You might be in a movie theater and you just be like, just pull out your phone, look at some porn, and it's a constant
Like
voice.
it's intrusive?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not like,
No.
what should I do right now? Well, maybe it interferes with
It's
life.
compulsive.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you think so you mentioned the shame around porn addiction, and I was wondering, do you feel like it's like a vicious cycle, the stigma and the shame that people often sort of like receive for even just watching porn? Does it like perpetuate their need to watch it even more because it's a way of suppressing their feelings and maybe reality in a lot of
Hmm.
ways? Like the way we approach it as a society, the way we kind of like villainize people who watch porn, like, no, that's bad.
Hmm.
Would you say?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
the broader topic is sex negativity, and
Mhm.
uh, there's a lot I could say about that. But yeah, absolutely, it can. I mean, there's shame and stigma regarding any addiction,
Mhm.
cigarettes included, right? And it can
But when you
cause.
think
Go
sorry,
ahead.
so I'm so sorry to interject, but, like, when you think about it, let's just be honest, as a society, sometimes there are some addictions that people deem more acceptable. Like, if someone says they have a smoking addiction, they might not get the same looks as someone who says, "I have a porn addiction." People might perceive that person or label that person a pervert or a creep because they have a porn addiction, rather than someone who, "Oh, they just have a nicotine addiction," you know?
Hmm. Oh
It's a
yeah,
little
absolutely,
different. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. And the isolation of that,
Yeah.
the self-esteem degradation of that,
Mhm.
the need. So, it creates a cycle of I'm ashamed of myself. I'm worthless. I'm pushing myself away from other people. I'm feeling bad. I need some way to cope. I'm going to turn to porn. I feel ashamed of myself. And, it just keeps going round and round for people. The other thing though, is that I want to say is that there's a lot of over self-diagnosing. We've known this for a
Yes.
long time with porn
Mhm.
addiction. There's a number of reasons for this. One is just misunderstanding of what
Mhm.
addiction is or what compulsions are or problem use is, but also that for some people, because of religion or culture or sex negativity,
Mhm.
any porn amount of watching is considered a problem. And thus,
Yeah.
um, if you're watching porn and, like a common scenario that I've seen in my office is you'll have, say, a husband who, is 15, 20 years into marriage. The sexual frequency has dropped off a little bit.
Mhm.
Maybe there's some trauma that he's dealing with. There's a widening distance, particularly physically, between him and his partner. And he turns to pornography and masturbation as a way of gratifying a need or just something to do. And say he does it once or twice a week and he gets
Mhm.
caught. He gets caught, and according to his religion and his wife's religion and the values that they have, this is considered cheating, which is fine if that's how people want to define. This is why you want to talk about these things up front with your dating partners, because
Right.
it might come up.
Yeah.
And because there's different values around this, similar to like, should we have kids or not? You should probably talk about that sort of thing before things get too far into the relationship. But so they have this value, and then he says, okay, I'm never going to do it again. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I sinned, or I broke the covenant of our
Mhm.
marriage, or, yes, I agree with you. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And then he goes for 3 months without looking at porn or masturbating. And then he has a couple beers with some friends, comes home, and he's just like, screw it. It's
Mhm.
been so long since I've, met that need, and I haven't had sex with my wife in 6 months. He does it, he gets caught, and then he ends up in my office and he says, I have a porn addiction.
Mhm.
Um, I would not define that as a porn addiction, depending.
It's
I mean,
not, yeah.
I would have to ask him questions, but there's a lot of people that will define it as a porn addiction, which, to my eyes, it's someone that has a need that is not being met. Now, it's not the wife's fault. It's not
Mhm.
like she has, he is sneaking around and he is lying and he is
Absolutely.
being deceptive. But I have worked with couples of opening it up to the possibility of just like, well,
Mhm.
let's look at that. I would never tell you to change your point of view about pornography and masturbation, but you do have a choice regarding that, and you can still choose to have that value, but maybe you've never even raised the question in your mind of, what do I want to believe about that? And or maybe we need to work on your sexuality. It opens up a lot of conversations, is the point.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't be treating porn addiction in that situation. I'm treating a lot of different issues for that couple.
Well, I think that the problem too is sometimes when we approach individuals who have an addiction, I think that the first instinct sometimes for like family members and friends is to villainize them and to label them as an addict. And that can be really hurtful and upsetting to that person. And they don't want that label. But then, maybe it causes depression, anxiety, and it makes them want to watch porn more or whatever that addiction is. It makes them want to do them more because they're being shamed by their loved ones and being
Mhm.
villainized. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, what are some signs and symptoms that someone can look out for in themselves or in someone else that could indicate a porn addiction?
Yeah.
Mm.
So there are various different online screening tools. Many of them are not very good. I did find
Why?
one. Well, for example, I mean, if you really just want to get specific, there's a very common, if not the most common screening test is called the
Mhm.
Internet Sex Screening Test.
Mm.
And it has to do with internet porn.
Mhm.
And a number of the items on here, I would not consider them to be necessarily signs of porn addiction. What's called
Like,
that? Like, for
it's not
example,
pathological.
well, right. I mean,
Yeah.
it's totally within normal limits to people that people have
Yeah.
these kinds of behaviors. Like,
Yeah.
you know, I have one of the items is yes or no.
Yeah.
I have joined sexual sites to gain access to online sexual material.
Yeah,
So I
that's
have joined a porn website that has porn. What? Like, that's a
yeah,
lot of people, right?
right.
Or I have purchased sexual products online.
Yeah, that doesn't indicate an addiction or anything pathological.
It doesn't even necessarily have to do with pornography. I mean, you could buy a toy online and it
Yeah.
have be a total healthy thing. So
Yeah.
but there is one test. I mean, they do have items on there that are more in line, but there's a lot of false positives. And I could get into the problem with the research and the treatment in this field because there's a lot of
Yeah.
religiosity that is interwoven in this and sex negativity. But in terms
Mhm.
of the test that I found that is actually
Mhm.
a good one is called the
Mhm.
porn addiction test, and it's on psychom.net, which is
Mhm.
it's not really something that psychologists use,
Mhm.
um, but I did find it to be helpful. There are a lot of other tests, but anyway, one that's free online. It's called the porn addiction quiz on psychom.net. And so one of the questions is there's 9 questions. Do you spend a lot of time thinking about pornography?
Mhm.
So if you answer yes to that, then that's an indicator. Another
Mhm.
is, do you ever lose track of
Mhm.
time while you're watching porn? So
Mhm.
meaning that you probably think, well, I'll look at porn for 10 minutes or 15 minutes and then it's 3 hours later.
Mhm.
It's a common experience for people who have porn addiction.
Yeah.
Number 3 is, have you ever tried to cut back on how much porn you consume? So that, that's a typical addictions question. Do you ever feel restless or irritable when you try to cut back on porn? So that, you know,
Yeah.
points to a compulsion, a craving, intrusive thought because
Withdrawal symptom. Yeah.
yeah, you could put
Yeah.
it that way. Have you
Yeah.
ever lied about how much porn you actually watch? Has
Mhm.
pornography ever interfered with your work, school, or relationships? Okay,
That's a good one. Yeah.
that's good. Do you ever continue to watch porn even when it had negative consequences on your relationship or your work? Have you ever done anything illegal to access pornography?
Mhm.
Do you ever feel guilty, sad, or anxious about looking at porn? The last one's a little funny because a lot of people will shame themselves because of sex negativity,
Mhm.
but you get the picture that, are you spending a lot more time than you want to be? Do you have uncontrollable urges about it? Have you had negative consequences in your life because of you watching porn? Because someone could watch porn and masturbate, 4 hours a day, but if they have all their other life aspects
Yeah.
going well and their relationships, their work, finances, their health, it's a hobby. It's something that they just really like to do. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing
Thank
pathological.
you. Thank you. I don't think that's clarified enough. The act of watching porn isn't bad. Like, you can watch porn, it doesn't make you a bad person or a perv, but it's just when it becomes an addiction, that's when it's pathological. And even then, you're not a perv or a creep, and we shouldn't label people that. right?
No. Yeah. Most people watch porn. Most people masturbate. So if
Yeah.
if watching porn and masturbating is that you're a perv, then I guess most people are pervs.
Right. Exactly. And so do you think just, switching over to the causes of it, what are some of the root causes for porn addiction in your opinion? Do you believe it's like an escape mechanism?
It can be. Yeah.
Mm,
So one of the problems with answering this question is we don't really have a lot of robust research around this because one, it's a taboo topic,
mhm,
even within my field to some extent,
mhm.
because I mean, it's not for me to read research about pornography addiction isn't taboo, but when you commit yourself as a clinician or an academic to this is going to be my thing, it raises questions. People are like, well, why is he so interested in this topic? Right. So
Mm.
it tends to be,
Really?
yeah. Yeah. I even ran into this
Okay.
when I was proposing a research study at my university about camming, pornography camming,
Yeah.
where it's cam people who are cam performers. This would have been, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. I was proposing this because I wanted to know the effect that it had on couples, because it's
Mm,
one thing for someone to watch pornography, right? If you had a partner that watched porn, or you sort of knew that maybe they watch porn.
mm.
It's another thing if they're actually interacting with a human being across chat, across
Yeah.
video, live video. Because I wondered if that crossed the line or if it was actually just considered, because it's all internet stuff. So I proposed this, and I had colleagues of mine, mentors of mine, who told
Mhm.
me, this is not a good idea for your career because people are going to ask questions as to why you're even looking into this. And I'm
It's
like,
that stigma, yeah.
yeah, I'm like, but so even in my field, and I didn't do it for the record because I did a completely other
Yeah, it
project.
makes sense.
Um, so that's one problem. Another is that of the people that are motivated to do this research, they're
Mhm.
often biased due to religion. So they have a bone to pick, and
Oh my gosh.
the research studies will look legit, but when you read them,
Skewed.
it
Yeah.
seems that way anyway.
Yeah.
And there are religious universities like BYU that are it'll say in the research study that the professors and the research, so you never know. Anyway, but the causes that we can look to that are often identified with lots of addictions are, it can be hereditary, for example,
Really?
susceptible not to porn addiction per se, but to addiction and compulsions.
Yeah.
um, you're prone to pleasure triggers, so to speak, and having those activations in your brain that are more effective than other people. There's some models that include that. Another is childhood mistreatment is associated with a lot of
Childhood
things.
trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
including addiction. Um, there's a lot of different reasons to why that would be, but moving forward, another possibility is that for some people that are, it seems like there's some evidence that our initial experiences in sexuality as we're developing as children and teenagers will imprint on us to some extent. Certain fetishes or preferences that we have as adults can be traced back to very early experience. The first time you felt that charge, the first time you felt that sexual
Mhm.
feeling, if it was associated with
Mhm.
a particular stimulus, then, and especially if that's reinforced throughout early development, for example, you have one kid who 13 looks at porn, masturbates, but also will start dating and fooling around physically with peers within reason. And for that individual, there's a variety of things that are being encoded as this is how you meet this need. Um, Whereas another person, the first experience they have is with pornography, and it's very intense for them, and they don't have any experiences with other human beings, then that can lead to problem use in the future, and also an inability to find safety or comfort or being turned on by real human beings,
Yeah.
because your brain has been conditioned to respond to a particular stimuli,
Mhm.
pornography. So it's not pornography. People often, because there is research that will point to early pornography exposure can be related to these things, but But there's other evidence. And the way that I think about it is that it's not that you necessarily need to take away pornography, although kids certainly don't need pornography. you know,
Yeah.
um, I mean, there are some benefits to pornography that I should say just while I'm on this topic, that there is research, and it's been around for a long time, that for a lot of people, they discovered themselves, their identity, because they might be in a very sex negative culture or church or family,
Yeah.
and they watch, because porn is a wide variety of content. You have everything from, very explicit, I don't know what you call it, but that kind of porn, to people just talking about their bodies and
Yeah.
enjoying themselves, and or couples that are just regular people that are open about their sexuality, queer people, all sorts of folks. And so for an individual, they might actually be liberated and destigmatized. And so they might really benefit from pornography. And that research has been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the idea is that with teenagers, we really want to help them to not have barriers to actually meeting people in person and developing normally in that way. Age appropriate, wherever they want. Maybe it's later at 18, or maybe it's as young as 12 when they start to hold hands with someone or something, to get that ball rolling, because that's typically, seemingly, maybe how we evolved, which is perhaps best. Another way of looking at it in terms of cause is that we evolved to, you think about a million years ago, it seems we evolved to respond to stimuli visually and auditory. So when we see sexual images or naked bodies or people having sex or whatever, we seem to respond to that. And the theory goes is that we're on the African savanna 200,000 years ago, and we see an attractive potential partner, or even hear people having sex. It sort of reminds us of it or something. And it introduces the drive, right? And you have a motivation. Well, on the African savanna 200,000 years ago, for us, the amount of times that would happen in a day would be limited, right? But with the internet and with pornography, it can be constant, right? So similar to the way that Cheetos and nachos hack into my evolved motivation to have fats and sugars and salt to too much degree, which isn't healthy for my body, pornography can hack into your system to give you too much of what you want. And then for some people, that can develop into problem use, right?
Yeah. And speaking of overstimulation, or like what you just mentioned, because of like that overstimulation or being exposed to pornography all the time, possibly because of an addiction, do you think that porn can impact bonding in romantic relationships, because people have this idealized this idea in their head of what like sex should be? And do you think it kind of damages relationships, or what would you say to some extent?
It goes both ways. So
Yeah.
it can both damage or be neutral or be positive for relationships. It really just, it's sort of like the way people talk about social media. They'll be like, well, social media rots your brain. And research demonstrates that, yeah, for some people there can be some negative effects, but for other people it actually enhances their brain, their moods. So it just depends on the context, on the person, on the way they use it, on the whole picture. So for one couple, absolutely, or for one individual, and we have studied this and found this to be true for some, that when they watch pornography, it'll twist their mind regarding what a body should look like or what sex should look like. It can be particularly misogynistic and sexist in a lot of corners. It's getting better over time.
Yes.
But and it's particularly bad in some societies like the United States and places like Japan, where it is exaggerated and demeaning to women. But so you could imagine someone being influenced in that way, or a couple that their relationship starts to cool off, and one or both of them watch a lot of pornography, and it creates this distance because there isn't motivation to bond sexually, or there could be hurt and betrayal feelings. But for another couple, another individual, it could liberate them. It could give them ideas. It could be a nice thing to do when your partner isn't around. It can be a way of flirting with your partner. You can do it with your partner. You can talk about it with your partner. There's just it really just depends on how it's being used. And we as a society play a role in that because of education and awareness, and also helping to guide young people about what they want to put in their brain, right? Because it's going to happen in all likelihood. So the general approach, though, is just say no and abstain or prevent and shame, which doesn't help.
And so before we move to our audience segment, I just wanted to ask, in terms of, sorry, just there's so many questions in here right now. Yeah, there's a ton of people in here right now. And so we're going to get to the audience segment soon, guys. But I just wanted to know, do you feel that when it comes to the way it impacts relationships, we need to learn to not stigmatize our partners for their use of pornography? Like, how do people go about conversations around these things as couples?
Well, everything hinges on your values. So
Yeah.
if so I would even go further back and say that when people are young, that they are given a venue to explore this for themselves of what are my values regarding pornography and masturbation, for me and for my partners. And if an individual is given enough freedom and space to explore that, and they establish their own value regarding that, then they can enact that. So if they, for example, are free to develop their own morals, and they develop morals saying like, I don't want pornography in my life because of various different reasons, and there are legit reasons why someone wouldn't want pornography in their life. They wouldn't want to contribute to the exploitation of the performers because the industry isn't set up currently to be able to regulate that. There are reasons. And so they say, I don't want that in my life, and I don't want my partner to be in that. Okay. So then you got to lead with that when you're dating. It should be in your dating profile, similar to, what sort of age are you looking for? Do you want to have kids? And how do you feel about pornography? That's a matching issue. And then if you have that, then you meet someone with similar values. And then if with that agreement, and with, similar to like monogamous couples versus polyamorous couples, if you are polyamorously oriented, you should know that about yourself, and you should have the freedom to explore that, and you should find other polyamorous people. You should not be with a monogamously oriented person because you're going to have drives to be with other people. Someone's not going to be happy in that situation. So if you have that agreement in your relationship, and you've established that, and then someone ends up watching pornography, I'm not saying that you should be shaming the other person, the person that looked at pornography, but because you have this agreement, you have the right to say, hey, we have this boundary. You weren't going to do this. You agreed you weren't going to do it. Whereas another couple, if they were to establish that that's okay at times, then they would. The problem is that there's so many couples where they've literally never talked about it. And they don't even know what their values are, because they haven't been encouraged to develop that, and they don't have the freedom to even choose themselves because of a high control group or even a cult that they're in regarding some religion. So, and I want to be clear, there's a lot of religious people who are very sex positive and watch porn or not, whatever. So it's not just religion, it's, culture and everything. But so if you're in a relationship where you never really talked about it, or even your partner might have even said to you, I don't watch porn, I'm never going to watch porn, but they didn't properly explore that for themselves, and then they ended up watching porn. There's a lot of conversations that need to happen. And as a couple therapist, when people come into my office, these kinds of transgressions, and I've had couples come in for this issue, it just blossoms into a whole exploration. There could be a lot of conversations that need to happen over years. That's what
I agree with that, because sometimes people feel like chemistry and like loving each other is enough. And sometimes when you're just not compatible with a person, you have to be honest about that instead of getting into a marriage and then these things come up later. And I remember one of your videos, you actually said this and it stuck with me. You said, opposites attract, but they don't last. And I really agree with that. Like if you have, opposite views on everything and you don't agree on most things, even if you love each other, it's not always enough, right?
Yeah. Well, if I said that, that's not exactly the way I think about it today. but yeah, we say opposites attract, but when we actually study, most couples are way more similar than we think of them being similar.
Absolutely. The
But
most
but
successful
absolutely,
rel
we should be talking
sorry.
about these things up
Yeah,
front.
yeah.
These kinds of but of course, because we live in a sex negative culture, people don't even know that they should be thinking about it, let alone talking about it with their dating partners.
Well, yeah, definitely. In the most successful relationships that I've seen, people usually have like the couples will usually have the same values. And I agree with what you said. We live in a sex negative culture, even here in the US. Like we need to open. That's why we're having these conversations here at Psych to Go, because we want to perpetuate and promote a more sex positive culture. And so that brings me to our audience segment where we answer your viewer questions. We have tons of fans in here from Psych to Go and Psychology in Seattle. Over 500 people are in here and there's a lot of questions. So are you ready, Dr. Honda?
I am.
Okay. So, first question, Jennifer asked, how do I tell my parents about my porn addiction without upsetting them? I have a very strict religious background and I don't want to tear my family apart.
Wow.
It's a loaded
Well,
question.
you'd have to truly define as to whether or not you have a porn addiction. Is it that you look at porn and masturbate, and it's not really a problem in your life, and it's only a problem in your life because of the culture and the family that you live in? Or are you actually compulsive and it actually is ruining your life? That's a huge distinction. You can have, for example, well, I won't go down that road, but well, let's go down that road. Let's say that back in the day, they would pathologize being gay, for example.
Yeah.
And one of the criteria was that you say, well, given your sexual behavior or impulses, is it negatively affecting your life? And they would say, yes, it is. But that's only because of oppression and stigma and hate. So, and the individual might even believe they deserve it because they've been told that, right? So just because it's impacting your life doesn't necessarily mean you have an addiction. It could be that your life and your context is the problem and it's not you. So that's an important distinction to make. But if you do have a legit addiction and you want to tell you, so the question is, how do I tell my family?
Yeah, that's pretty much in a nutshell. Yeah, the question. Like, how do I tell them without them tearing my
Freaking out?
yeah, freaking out essentially.
I don't know. Well, one, you don't necessarily have to tell your family. You could if you want to. Um, you also have options. If you're in a jurisdiction that the laws are such that this is true, that you can seek clinical help, mental health treatment in a confidential way, and
Do you
then
feel like if someone has a porn addiction, they shouldn't have to disclose it to family and friends? Because some people have differing opinions on that, like they should tell people. I don't know. What's your
well, there's no like scientific obligation that they have
Yeah,
to that anyone has to tell anyone about any of an addiction that they have. Um, so that's a value statement, I suppose.
yeah,
But I would hope that any family would care about their members, and if someone is suffering from porn addiction, that they would want to be helpful. And a big
exactly.
part of being helpful is to not attack them for disclosing that they're suffering from something. So it would be understandable if someone, reasonably predicted that they would be attacked. The overall effect would be negative for them, that they would conclude that they would not tell them at first, at the very least. I wouldn't fault them for that by
Yeah,
any means.
absolutely.
You should get help. The help you deserve to get the help that you deserve. You deserve to get help and
Absolutely.
support. That's the
Mhm.
bottom line. And if your family can be a part of that, then great. And if they can't, then screw them.
Yeah, exactly. Jennifer, I wish you luck with that, and you shouldn't feel bad about being open about your addiction. So, moving on to the next question. This was asked by John Leon. He asked, what if you're in a relationship and you have a porn addiction and you're actively trying to get rid of those urges? Should your partner still divorce you, in your opinion? What do you think, Dr. Honda?
What if you're in a relationship, you have porn addiction, you're actively trying to get rid? Should the partner still divorce? I mean, it depends. Obviously, it could be a reason. Well, a lot. There's a lot of factors that could play a role. But I would have clinically, I would not I can't answer that question because that's a question that comes from someone's heart. As a citizen, I would have an opinion about that if my friends, for example, they came to me and they were like, yeah, my partner has a porn addiction. They're really working hard on it, but screw them. I don't want to be with an addict. I judge that person for ditching their partner when they're in need, and also given that they're trying. So, I think that it depends on the situation. I can also see another situation where someone is legit trying to recover from porn addiction, but it's taking a long time. It's continuing to degrade everyone's life, including the person with the porn addiction and everyone around them, and especially their partner. It takes a long time. There's a lot of relapses. There's a lot of suffering. And could I see a scenario where friends come to me and say, look, I know they're working on it, but I just can't take it anymore. And I just can't do it. Would I think that was reasonable? Perhaps. So it just depends on the situation.
And then the next question is from Clav. They ask, hello, doctor, what do I do if I suffer from a porn addiction, but I'm in a relationship with someone who is asexual?
Well, again, it depends on if you actually have a porn addiction. I would say 60% of the time when a client came to me saying they had a porn addiction, I did not actually conclude that they had a compulsive porn problem.
Wow.
So it all depends on the compulsiveness and the obsessiveness and the negative effects on one's life. So there's that. But if it's legit porn addiction, so the question is, I don't see the question.
Oh, sorry.
So how do I deal with it with my partner when my partner is asexual?
Yeah, that's the question. Like, what do you do if your partner's asexual, but you have a porn addiction? Which, in my opinion, would be like an issue of incompatibility, but that's just my take.
It depends.
Yeah.
It all just depends on what you've communicated about and your agreements. It's all about agreements, and it's all about communication. So
Yep.
if you legit have a porn addiction, how does your partner feel about it, regardless of their asexuality? How does it affect them? How does it affect you? That's what I'd say to that.
Thank you. And then the next question is from Morgan the Void. She asked, what if, and this is an amazing question, actually. It's a really good question. What if porn addiction coexists with a drug addiction? Does one fuel the other, and should they be treated separately or both at the same time?
Yeah, it is a good question.
Mm-hmm.
They often are coexisting, co-occurring, comorbid. Addictions tend to do that, but with porn addiction in particular, it is, according to research, associated with drug addiction. Do they fuel each other? They can, yeah. Also, they can generate from the same place. And should they, meaning that someone needs to escape in general, and they use both porn and substance to escape. Also, but in terms of treatment, could they be treated at the same time? Yeah, you can go to a 12-step group. You can even go to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and talk about if alcohol is the drug of choice and the individual is recovering from alcoholism through AA. AA groups, in my experience, will welcome compulsions of other sorts, like pornography and that kind of thing. And the same principles can be followed of having a sponsor and, trigger management and setting up a system that is, conducive to success. All the same principles apply to both addiction recoveries.
And then this next question is asked by Melissa. This is actually, I think, like a fan question, someone who's like really into psychology in Seattle. They asked, Melissa asked Dr. Honda, when are you going to have Darcy and Stacy on your podcast?
I don't think they would ever want to come.
That too.
I would love to talk to them. I have so many questions because I always wonder. I mean, I would love to talk to them off camera, really, just to know. I've talked with people in their life off camera.
Yeah.
But
Paul, right?
But I don't think they would ever want to come on my show, is the point.
I always say, I watch your channel, and I always say that I feel like you should be the host of the 90 Day Fiancé reunions or of the Darcy and Stacey reunions, because I think you're that good.
I'm not that good. I would screw it up. I look up to Sean a lot.
Sean Robinson, yeah, she's good. But I just feel like you have the insight, though. You like are a licensed family marriage
Yeah,
therapist, and that's what they need.
but I'd yammer. I'd ask too many questions. I'd have too many caveats. I would, I'd probably be too nice because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Aw, yes.
So and plus on camera with all the lights and everything, I would freeze. I wouldn't know what to do. So
It is a
uh,
lot of pressure.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but that would you make an appearance if they invited you? Because they do that sometimes. They have like guests appear, like experts appear. If they invited you, like, hey, do you want to just do like film a little segment? Would you do it?
No, because I'd screw that one up too somehow, and it would end up in the edit, and I would never be able to sleep at night again. So no,
Oh my
I
gosh.
want to be here in my office with my own microphone and it's just like everything's fine. My dogs and my wife are in the other room, and everything's good. So
I
that's the way
love
I want.
that. And then somewhat Mondo asks, how do you tell the difference between porn addiction and I'm guessing they are referring to other addictions?
Well, there isn't a difference necessarily regarding the pattern, the obsession, the compulsions, the negative effects, the progressive nature, the shame, the hiding, the difficulty controlling it, it gets worse over time. But the main difference is one involves pornography and the others involve the other behavior or substances.
Hmm. And then Emma asks, is porn addiction linked to other mental illnesses like depression or adrenaline junkies? You can read that on the screen.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, adrenaline junkies sometimes in the research will call this like sensation seekers, this sort of thing. But yeah, it does co-occur with mainly anxiety, but also mood disorders, depression, bipolar, also trauma-related disorders. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Mainly anxiety, depression, those sorts of things. Yeah.
And then you answer this question, but just like I think that it's really important to our viewers to know this. Angel777 asked, is porn an addiction if it doesn't affect your social and work life in general?
Is it an addiction if it doesn't affect?
Yeah.
No, it's
Yep.
not. It's
It's
not an
not.
addiction. If it doesn't negatively impact your life, it's a very squishy, evaluation. There's a lot of debate there. Also, when you talk to someone who actually we would term as having a problem use of porn, they might be in denial of it, and you ask everyone around them, is there a problem there? They might say yes, but the individual is in denial. So, there's a lot of different things that have to be taken into consideration. But yeah, if objectively or as objectively as you can answer this question, there's no negative impact of watching pornography, then yeah, it's not a problem.
This will be our last viewer question. Sailor C asks, is there any way to help my partner overcome a porn addiction? I know it's their choice to overcome it, but I want to help if I can.
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been working on this question, and people have been working on this question for decades, both clinically and partners of people who suffer from addiction. Al-Anon, the group, has been around for a long time. There's a lot of wisdom and a lot of guidance that Al-Anon can provide for people who have partners addicted to any substance or behavior, like pornography. So you can seek their support groups out and their information. But it is it's difficult because you can watch your partner suffer from a problem and it hurts them mostly, but it also hurts you. And everything, they're powerless over their addiction. You are even more powerless if it's possible to be more powerless over something. And everything generates from the individual having most of the time want to recover. So they have to want to do it. And there's a lot of research and observation about how people have those moments where they turn the corner and let's say, yeah, I've done little things here and there. I tried using filters online, or I said to myself I was going to, um, you know, take my laptop and put it in my wife's bedroom, and then that'll prevent me from, they'll take these little measures, but it's never enough with addiction. It finds a way, and eventually they get to a point, and and how do they get there, and when will they get there, and how do we get them there? There's a lot of wisdom and experience around this, and if you're a partner of that, getting to know that wisdom and getting that help and having guidance around that is important. But it depends on your partner. If your partner doesn't want to make that choice, then they don't make that choice, and then you have to make choices yourself about what you want to do about that. Could be a deal breaker at a certain point. You could draw boundaries around it. There's a lot of difficulty there, is what I'm saying. Yeah, but the breeding ground for that to happen, that you do have control over, that I can't say, is you don't want to add to the shame, is the point.
Absolutely. Or the stigma.
Yeah, you want to, and you also want to speak from your feelings, instead of saying to someone, you have a problem and this is bothersome. You want to convey to them in a non-accusatory and as compassionate way as you can how their addiction affects you. When you do this and I see you doing this, I have these emotions, and maybe I'm unreasonable, but this is how I'm feeling. What that'll do is it alerts the person with the addiction to the negative consequences, because they can go into denial of it. Also, it gives them a chance to have compassion and empathy for you, which at the very least in the moment can be helpful to you as a partner of someone with addiction. But also, that it doesn't have stigma or shaming or conflict. The person with the addiction is freer. People who recover from addictions, their lives tend to need to go a little better than they were earlier, because when you're suffering from addiction, it starts to impact your life. People start to distance, your life starts falling apart. Then you need the substance or the behavior even more, because you need to escape, or you need just something to get you through it. So if you can not add to that, now you don't want to enable. So there's a lot of things to talk about in terms of, but if you can create a space where it's just like, hey, if you want to recover, I am right here for you, and I love you, and I care about you, and if you want to talk about it, just an open experience. But it's hard to do when you're in the moment, because you're hurt by it. It can be really hurtful.
Well, thank you for that, Dr. Honda, and thank you to our amazing viewers for participating in our fun audience segment. And so that brings me to my last question, Dr. Honda. I want to know, what can we do to dismantle the stigma around just the use of pornography and porn addiction? Should we have sex education in schools? Like, what can our society do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know.
You seem intimidated by the question.
Well, because in the past, I would have thought, yeah, I mean, let's increase education. But there are certain movements in our society, in our country, that are going in the opposite direction. So, and preventing these kinds of things from even being discussed in schools or otherwise. So I don't know. I do know in my lifetime, things have gotten better. Even in the last 10 years. So all of us including you doing this episode, is furthering that destigmatization, and that seems to be working. So I would say that just everyone keep doing what they're doing, keep talking about it, actually talk to experts. Talk about it in schools, age appropriateness, just the destigmatization of treatment in general, therapy in general, and recovery in general. So I would say everyone just keep doing what Michelle is doing.
Yeah, just do what I'm doing, okay? I'm just kidding. Well, thank you, Dr. Honda. Thank you for joining us. I'm a huge fan. We had so many fans in here, and they're so happy to have been able to participate today. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone at Psych2Go and Psychology in Seattle, for joining us today. Have a great day. Bye-bye.